What's up, everyone? Tera Roberts here with FantasyPros, bringing you my players to cut for Week 5. Before we get started, if you want a chance to win a signed Christian McCaffrey San Francisco 49ers jersey courtesy of bettingpros.com, your place to start betting smarter and not harder, you need to subscribe to the FantasyPros YouTube channel right now. Comment below on this video and that's it. We'll be announcing the winner right here on the channel, so make sure you turn on those notifications so you can be alerted when new episodes are up and to claim your prize. Now let's go ahead and dive right in with players to cut in deep leagues of 12 teams or more. First up, Chigoziem Okonkwo. This one pains me because I was so pro Chig this offseason, and I will die on a hill that conceptually, Chig was a fine late round tight end. But the Titans offense is terrible. Derrick Henry finally had his big breakout game, but Ryan Tannehill has 67 completions for the year. That is less than Zach Wilson and Desmond Ridder. The same as Bryce Young, who has played one fewer game. Tannehill has one more passing touchdown than Derrick Henry. All Titans pass catchers are struggling, but Chig in particular is really underperforming. He's currently tight end 35 in PPR, and his scores week by week are as follows. 0 fantasy points in week 1, 7.5 in week 2. That was his season high. 3.7 in week 3, and 5.9 in week 4. His receptions are low, his yardage is low, he's yet to score a touchdown. I believe in Chig, the talent, on a different team with a different quarterback. This is just a terrible situation and we just can't trust him in our starting lineup. Next up, Joshua Kelly. Narrowing down this list was actually very difficult because I wanted to include literally everyone from last week. Outside of Dalton Schultz, who was saved by a touchdown, the entire Week 4 cut list lived up to his name. Players that need to be cut. So go back and take a look for that for more players that are very cut worthy, but one player that I will talk about one more time is Joshua Kelly. I am adding Kelly back to the list because he is moving up. Kelly was in the players to cut in shallow leagues list last week, and this week he's made his way onto the players to cut in deep leagues list. Joshua Kelly had a whole 3 weeks to prove himself, to prove that he was roster worthy, and a top tier handcuff for Austin Ekeler. Instead, he proved that his big week 1 performance was just a random anomaly that will never, ever repeat. Maybe he plays well as a change of pace back to Austin Ekeler. That is very possible. I exaggerate when I say never ever because really it isn't unusual for guys to fail as a lead back but do well playing off of the RB1. Perhaps that's what happened in week 1, and it could happen again when Ekeler returns, but would you really feel comfortable putting him back into your lineup after 3 straight weeks of 6 or less fantasy points? I certainly wouldn't. We want to roster high-end handcuffs, and Kelly has proven he just isn't that type of running back. Kareem Hunt. If you have a deep bench and your team is solid, there's really nothing that makes you have to cut Hunt if there's nothing that's really appealing to you on waivers. This isn't a really hard and steady you must drop him. It's totally different from Joshua Kelly, where Kelly has proven that he simply isn't worthy of a roster spot. Hunt really hasn't gotten the opportunity yet. He's gotten 5 carries in each game that he's played with roughly a 20% snap count. It's tough to really make much of his involvement because we don't know how much ramp up time he needed because he had 0 training camp time. It's possible that he's ramping up and can provide some value at some point, but bye weeks have hit and you need usable bodies on your fantasy roster, and right now Kareem Hunt just isn't one of those guys. The allure of Hunt is understandable because it's not like Jerome Ford has had stellar performances. Ford has had a total of 19 carries for 44 rushing yards, but the past 2 weeks have been bad matchups and bad situations. It's unlikely that Tennessee makes any significant changes, and Hunt's role just isn't usable in your fantasy lineup. Juju Smith-Schuster. I was really trying to not repeat players, but this one I have to because this is the 3rd week for Juju Smith-Schuster on this list, and yet this man is still 45% rostered in Yahoo leagues and 53% rostered in ESPN leagues. I am reaching out to beg, please move on from Juju Smith-Schuster. His best performance came in week 2 against Miami. That performance was 5 receptions on 6 targets for 28 yards. That is it. That's all. 7.8 fantasy points in PPR, and that was an excellent matchup. I can't fathom a scenario where I advise anyone to start Juju. He's wide receiver 86. Mac Jones' best performance came in week 1 where he threw for over 300 yards and 3 touchdowns. Juju had 33 of those yards. You gotta move on. Moving on to players to cut in shallow leagues. First up, Ezekiel Elliott. Prior to the Sunday game, we got reports that Ezekiel Elliott would be seeing an expanded role. That role really didn't exist, and Zeke's day was 6 carries for 16 yards and 2 receptions for 6 yards. Ramondre Stevenson still operated as the lead back. Now, that's not a vote of confidence in Stevenson. I have very little confidence in Stevenson, but I just don't really see where Zeke's role increases to the point of fantasy relevancy. Looking at Zeke's overall 2022 numbers, we know his bread and butter was his goal line work. He clearly lost a step in 2022, but he was still an excellent goal line back. He could see that type of usage in New England, if New England could actually get to the goal line. New England has just 1 rushing touchdown. Unless this offense makes a big turnaround, I just don't see where Zeke can be someone that we ever feel comfortable plugging into our lineups. He's definitely worth a hold in deeper leagues, but in shallow leagues, I'd rather roster handcuffs in better offenses. Next up, Daniel Jones. This is exclusively in shallow leagues. You cannot afford to do it in deep leagues, unfortunately, because quarterback play has been so erratic and underwhelming from some of the guys that were being drafted as QB1s like Joe Burrow and Dak Prescott. And because consistent top performances from streaming options like Jordan Love and CJ Stroud, we're in this weird situation where there's not a ton of streaming options available for waivers, because people are either forced to roster a secondary option or have the luxury of rostering another strong option. Daniel Jones has rushing upside that makes him a threat, even though the Giants are definitely awful. And for that reason, he's a player you can not drop to waivers in deep leagues. But in shallow leagues, you more than likely have been starting someone else. Now, there is one caveat. The matchup against Miami's defense is good. You can start him this week if you have to, but if you have a stronger option, just go ahead and cut Jones if you're not planning to start him. This is the last week you'll feel comfortable starting him. His schedule after Miami is Buffalo, Washington, and then the New York Jets. If you're not starting him this week, there is 0 point in holding on. A.J. Dillon. Despite being a lead back for 2 weeks in a row with Aaron Jones out, and technically a 3rd week with Aaron Jones on a snap count, A.J. Dillon is failing miserably. Now, I know the excuse people will make because I've had to fight it. The offensive line is an issue, and that is true. The line is a huge problem. The line was intact in week 1. Dillon averaged 1.46 yards per carry on 13 carries, compared to Aaron Jones' 4.56 yards per carry on 9 carries. The problem is we hold handcuffs for the purpose of their value when their RB1 goes down. And if they fail to perform at a strong level when given the opportunity, there's just no point in rostering them. Because there are plenty of handcuffs on waivers, and those handcuffs could have higher potential. A.J. Dillon has shown us the potential just might not be there for him. On top of that, Dillon was expected to have standalone value. This is a guy who had 7 rushing touchdowns last year as the preferred goal line back in tandem with Jones. That sliver of promise does keep him on rosters in deeper leagues, because the road ahead does get softer in terms of matchups, so it's possible he could improve, but in shallow leagues, you need to let him go. And finally, Brandon Cooks. Reputation alone makes you terrified to cut Brandon Cooks. He's typically been a very consistent wide receiver too. Even last season wasn't that bad. It was just riddled by poor quarterback play and injuries. And Michael Gallup was actually on my cut list earlier in the season because of having to play behind Brandon Cooks. But although the snaps continue to favor Cooks, the output is favoring Michael Gallup. You also got strong involvement from Jake Ferguson, who has seen 7 targets in all but 1 game. You've also got running backs who are seeing a fair amount of targets as well. Everything is very evenly spread out. And Cooks simply doesn't appear to have a strong enough target share to warrant using him as a flex option. I think that's the big issue here. Mike McCarthy is pushing a fairly balanced attack across the board for all players. And I hate to state the obvious, but we also could just be at that time period with Brandon Cooks. That time period when you hit 30 and you hit a wall in production. He might not have the upside anymore. In shallow leagues, you can move on from Brandon Cooks. Thanks for watching this video. Be sure to like the video and subscribe to FantasyPros, and remember, if you want a chance to win a signed Christian McCaffrey San Francisco 49ers jersey courtesy of bettingpros.com, your place to start betting smarter and not harder, you need to subscribe to the FantasyPros YouTube channel right now. Comment below on this video, and that's it. We will be announcing the winner right here on the channel, so make sure you turn on those notifications so you can be alerted when new episodes are up and to claim your prize.